Let's talk about the extortion first. Can you tell us when you were first approached and how you were approached? Did you get a phone call? Was it an email, a letter? How?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, the information came to us. They were trying to turn our pain into their gain. So we were both shocked and outraged that they would demand this much of God's money.
Okay, now you said ladies, but let's be fair to the men.
It can happen.
It's not always men. If a man is unfaithful, he had to have a woman. Well, not these days, I guess.
Right.
Most of the time, he had to have a woman to be unfaithful with.
Forgiveness does not start out usually as a feeling. It starts out as a choice.
There's something we need to talk about, something that hasn't been fully addressed in the mainstream yet, but it's starting to surface more and more. And this time, it has to do with none other than Joanie Lamb and her late husband, Marcus Lamb, the faces behind Daystar television network. If you've been following any of the recent discussions about church scandals, televangelist cover-ups, or controversies involving Christian media empires, you already know that Daystar isn't new to drama. But what we just uncovered takes things to another level. And honestly, the way they've tried to keep this under wraps is disturbing. Let's start with the part that's raising the most eyebrows. There's reportedly an interview out there, one that could have shifted the public's entire perception of Daystar, but it was quickly shut down. Sources say Marcus and Joanie Lamb actively worked behind the scenes to block it from ever seeing the light of day. They didn't want the public to hear it. They didn't want the questions. They didn't want the backlash. And most importantly, they didn't want anyone messing with their carefully crafted image. Now, why would someone go to such lengths to stop a simple interview from getting out? Because it wasn't just a random conversation. From what we've learned, that interview included first-hand accounts, people who were directly involved or affected by things that happened inside the Daystar circle. People who knew what went down. People who tried to speak up. And instead of being welcomed with open arms, or even given a platform to be heard, they were silenced. This isn't just about one bad decision or one awkward moment. It's about a consistent pattern. A pattern of covering things up. A pattern of trying to spin stories to protect an image. And the more you look into it, the clearer it becomes that there's a lot they didn't want the public to know. Let's get into the story of Marcus Lamb, because that's where a lot of the unraveling begins. If you were to judge him only by what you saw on Christian television, you'd probably think he was the perfect preacher. A devoted man of faith. A loving husband. A strong leader. Someone who spoke boldly, prayed passionately, and never missed a beat when preaching about righteousness, purity, and doing what's right in the eyes of God. But behind that polished image, there were secrets. Serious ones. For 7 years, yes, not 7 days, not 7 months, but 7 full years, Marcus Lamb carried on a secret affair with a woman who wasn't just someone from outside his world. She was married. And he was married to Joanie the entire time. While he was out there preaching about family values and staying faithful to your spouse, he was betraying his vows behind closed doors. And when the truth finally came out, did he take responsibility? Not really. Instead of sitting down, looking the public in the eye, and saying, "Yes, I failed. I messed up. I hurt people," Marcus tried to flip the script. He went on TV, not to fully confess or apologize, but to tell a story about how someone was supposedly trying to blackmail him. And not just for a small amount. No. He claimed they were trying to extort him for $7.5 million. And here's the wildest part. He didn't just say it was money. He claimed that it was God's money. He framed himself as the victim. As if the biggest issue wasn't that he betrayed his wife and misled his followers for nearly a decade, but that someone had dared to try and expose it. Think about that for a second. Imagine sitting at home, maybe even struggling with your own faith, trying to do what's right in your life. You turn on Daystar, expecting to be inspired. And what you get is a man who spent years doing the exact opposite of what he preached, then stands up in front of the world and tries to act like he's the one being attacked. That moment on television, it wasn't about healing. It wasn't about truth. It was about controlling the story. And sadly, a lot of people bought into it. Some felt sorry for him. Some defended him. And some, still to this day, refuse to believe he did anything wrong. But facts are facts. This wasn't just a slip-up. It was a choice he made again and again, for years. It was a betrayal of trust, both in his marriage and to the people who supported his ministry. And the fallout from that affair. It wasn't just about a broken promise between two people. It created shockwaves that are still being felt in the Daystar community today. Now, let's go back to that interview that Marcus and Joanie allegedly shut down. What was in it that they were so desperate to hide? Was it more details about the affair? Maybe other women? Maybe former staff members speaking out about how they were treated? We don't know the full contents yet, but what we do know is this. If leaders are trying this hard to silence something, there's probably a reason they don't want it heard. And that should concern all of us. Because when spiritual leaders become more concerned with reputation than with truth, that's when real damage is done. That's when victims are ignored. That's when people walk away from faith, not because of God, but because of the people who claim to speak on his behalf. So what happens now? Well, that depends on us. It depends on whether we're willing to keep asking hard questions. Whether we're willing to listen, not just to the polished sermons and rehearsed speeches, but to the people whose stories haven't been told yet. Marcus Lamb is gone now. He passed away in 2021. But his legacy and the choices he made are still very much a part of the conversation. And Joanie Lamb? She's still in the spotlight. Still running Daystar. Still speaking to millions of viewers. But the questions haven't gone away. In fact, they're louder than ever. If the truth really matters, then we have to keep digging. We have to keep speaking up. And we have to make sure that no one, no matter how famous or powerful, gets to rewrite the story to make themselves look good at the expense of the people they've hurt. So if you care about accountability, if you believe that spiritual leaders should be held to the same standard they preach about, and if you're tired of the lies, the cover-ups, and the manipulation, then stick around. Because we're not done yet. There's more coming. More interviews. More revelations. And more stories that the public deserves to hear. Make sure you're subscribed. Share this with someone who needs to know what's really going on behind the scenes. And don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, because sometimes that's the only way the truth comes out.
The couple says 3 people threatened to go public with the affair if the ministry didn't pay them $7.5 million.
Let's talk about the extortion first. Can you tell us when you were first approached and how you were approached? Did you get a phone call? Was it an email, a letter? How?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, the information came to us. They were trying to turn our pain into their gain. So we were both shocked and outraged that they would demand this much of God's money.
Lamb is feeding to these media outlets, including Good Morning America and Ms. Roberts. Oh, they're trying to extort me. They're extorting me, all right. So Roberts says, let's talk about the extortion. She's going with his narrative. Oh, she's a journalist, all right. Can you tell us when you were first approached and how you were approached? Now, please listen very closely. Did you get a phone call? Was it in an email, a letter? How? In other words, Marcus, how did you find out that these people are trying to extort you? Email, phone call, letter, how? Marcus Lamb dodged the question.
Tell us when you were first approached and how you were approached. Did you get a phone call? Was it an email, a letter? How?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, the information came to us.
Evidently, he did not want the viewers to, and I'm just reading from the lawsuit that alleges what I'm entertainment opinion looking at, viewers to learn that the supposed extortion took place in a meeting with 2 of Daystar's lawyers in their office, and that the person communicating the supposed threat was not the 3 supposed extortionists, but a licensed attorney with 29 years of experience and a spotless record. Instead of answering the question, Marcus Lamb said, well, a couple of weeks ago, the information came to us that these 3 people were demanding $7.5 million in order to keep from going to the media. This I'm reading from the lawsuit that alleges these things that I'm opining about for entertainment purposes. The statement was false and defamatory. The segment concluded with Miss Roberts asking, and Marcus, a final question about the extortion case. She's full blown, but and why wouldn't they? This was really pretty smart on the part of Marcus and Joanie, because, all right, it's finally going to come out what they've been covering up, and they're going to have to deal with it one way or another, but they want to spin it in a way that is to their advantage. And so they concoct it. This is my opinion, entertainment. So they concoct this way of dealing with it. And of course, the secular media is going to pick up with the secular media loves a Christian in sin story. They love that. So of course they're going to give it to them. And then they're spoon feeding the narrative that they want them to go for. And I'm sorry, maybe they paid this Ms. Roberts off and the network off, or maybe she just fell for all of that. But anyway, obviously, he had led her to believe that the identities and location of the three supposed extortionists were unknown and that a manhunt was underway. See, Marcus Lamb is making them think these three people are out there somewhere and they're trying to extort us. Nobody knows who they are, but we're going to find them. I called the law. I called the sheriff. I called the sheriff of Boone County, and he's coming down and he's going to... But that was a lie. He knew exactly who they were. He knew exactly who these individuals were and why they had gotten in contact, and it wasn't to extort, it was to have things made right after they had been wronged. He knew who they were, and he knew who their attorney was because the attorney had met with them on their premises.
Marcus Lamb once stood in front of cameras and told the world that 3 people tried to blackmail him. He said they wanted $7.5 million from him. That's a pretty serious accusation, right? He framed it as an attack, like he was being targeted by people who were out to get him or ruin his reputation. But when you take a deeper look at what was actually going on behind the scenes, that dramatic story starts to fall apart. The truth is much more complicated, and honestly, way more disturbing. So, let's slow down and unpack it piece by piece. First of all, this wasn't some random group of strangers trying to shake Marcus down for money. These weren't criminals lurking in the shadows. The people he accused? They were former employees of Daystar, the Christian TV network he and his wife Joanie built from the ground up. These people weren't outsiders, they were insiders. They worked there. They gave years of their lives to the organization. And when things went wrong, they did what a lot of people would do. They filed a lawsuit. That's not blackmail. That's using the legal system to call out injustice. So what were they suing for? Let's talk specifically about one of the women involved. She was the second plaintiff in the case. Her story is really important because it highlights just how twisted and unfair things were behind the scenes at Daystar. She started working at Daystar way back in 2002. 4 years, she worked hard. She wasn't just some background staffer either. She was the producer of The Joanie Show. Yes, that Joanie, as in Joanie Lamb, Marcus's wife. This woman worked directly with her. So, we're talking about someone who was trusted, skilled, and clearly good at her job. You don't just get handed a producer role unless you've proven yourself. So, what happened? Why did she get fired after nearly 8 years of service? Here's where things get messy. She didn't mess up. She didn't break a company rule that endangered anyone. She didn't steal, lie, or slack off. Her only mistake? She started dating another employee. That's it. A consensual adult relationship with someone who also worked at Daystar. And for that, she was let go. But here's the kicker, the guy she was dating? He got to keep his job. No suspension. No demotion. No reprimand. Nothing. He just kept working like nothing ever happened, while she was shown the door. How is that fair? How is that justice? Imagine working somewhere for 8 years, building relationships, building your career, and then being fired for something so minor, and something that your male coworker didn't even get in trouble for. That kind of double standard is hard to ignore. It's not just wrong, it's discriminatory. And this is where the lawsuit comes in.
Here's what the court document says. She was the producer of The Joanie Show, a production starring Joanie Lamb. Throughout her employment, plaintiff worked closely with Joanie Lamb, who was her direct supervisor the entire time she was employed by Daystar. During the course of plaintiff's employment, plaintiff began to date a male employee of Daystar. The relationship was not prohibited by any policy of Daystar. On January 11th, 2010, Joanie Lamb instructed plaintiff to terminate her relationship with the other employee. For approximately 2 hours, allegedly, Joanie Lamb berated, belittled, and harassed plaintiff. Joanie Lamb told plaintiff that she had shamed both Daystar and Joanie Lamb, called plaintiff a liar and a bad example, and told plaintiff she was unhealthy. Joanie Lamb also asked the plaintiff explicit and inappropriate questions about her relationship with the other employee. No one at Daystar made any such demand of the male employee whom the plaintiff was dating. Now, Daystar deliberately humiliated the plaintiff. She was subject to numerous instances of verbal abuse and insults, some of which were directly related to her gender. On March 10th, 2010, plaintiff was fired without lawful excuse. The male employee whom plaintiff had been dating was neither demoted nor terminated as a result of his relationship.
If you were this woman's lawyer, what would you do? You'd fight for her. You'd dig into the company's history. You'd ask questions like, why was this woman punished for something a man wasn't? You'd look for patterns, for proof that the environment was toxic or unfair. And guess what? When you start digging, you find that this wasn't an isolated case of unfairness. You start to notice that there might be something bigger going on, something rooted in hypocrisy and power. Now let's bring Marcus back into the picture. At the same time this woman was being fired for a consensual relationship, Marcus himself had been hiding something way more serious, a years-long affair with another woman. Not a one-night mistake. A full-blown, years-long relationship behind his wife's back. And he was supposed to be the head of the ministry. The man preaching about family values and Christian marriage was the one breaking his own vows in private. So here's the big question. How do you justify firing a woman for dating a coworker when the founder of the whole network is cheating on his wife? How does that make sense? It doesn't. And that's why bringing up Marcus's affair in a lawsuit isn't blackmail. It's not an attempt to destroy someone out of spite. It's evidence. It shows a clear pattern of behavior at the top. If the people in charge aren't living up to the standards they enforce on everyone else, that's something the court needs to know. It's part of the story. And yet, Marcus didn't frame it that way. He didn't admit wrongdoing or acknowledge the double standards. Instead, he went public and said people were trying to extort him. He tried to make it seem like the real crime was people asking for money to settle a lawsuit, not the years of unfair treatment and moral failings that led to the lawsuit in the first place. That kind of spin is powerful, especially when it comes from someone with a huge platform and a loyal fanbase. But here's the thing, just because someone is famous or speaks with confidence doesn't mean they're telling the truth. And just because someone cries on camera or talks about being a victim doesn't mean they didn't hurt other people first. This woman lost her job, not because she was bad at it, not because she broke the law, but because she had a relationship, and because she was a woman. And when she stood up for herself, the man at the top cried extortion instead of facing the facts. We have to stop accepting these kinds of cover-ups. Too often, people in power twist the story to protect themselves. They call accountability attacks. They call truth-telling gossip. They call legal action blackmail. But if someone has genuinely been wronged, they have every right to speak up. They have every right to seek justice. And we, as the public, have a responsibility to listen, really listen, to what's being said. This case isn't just about one woman or even just about Marcus Lamb. It's about the culture inside Daystar and the way power was used, and possibly abused. It's about the way some leaders hide behind religion and fame to dodge consequences. And it's about how easy it is for truth to be buried under a shiny, well-rehearsed public image. There's more to this story. A lot more. So don't stop asking questions. Don't be afraid to dig deeper. And definitely don't take everything you hear from a stage or screen at face value. Sometimes the real story, the one that matters most, is the one that powerful people are trying hardest to silence.
They were trying to turn our pain into their gain. So we were both shocked and outraged that they would demand this much of God's money.
We keep hearing about this $7.5 million, right? Marcus Lamb, the same man who built a career preaching about righteousness, family, and God's will, stood before his audience and claimed that this money was God's money. He said it was being used responsibly, with integrity, to spread the gospel. But once you start looking at the details behind closed doors, things start to feel a whole lot darker. So here's the question people are too afraid to ask. Whose money was it really? Was it truly God's money, or was it actually the hard-earned money of everyday people? The viewers, the church members, the loyal believers, folks who gave what they could, sometimes more than they could afford, because they trusted the message. People who donated in good faith, thinking their money was going to support missions, feed the hungry, build schools, or broadcast sermons to the lost. Not many thought they were financing secret hotel suites or luxury trips for a man sneaking around with a woman who wasn't his wife. And yet, that's exactly what was happening. Behind the scenes, Marcus was living a completely different life than the one he presented on camera. While he told people to live holy, to be faithful, to trust God with everything, they had no idea he was using that same trust to pay for private getaways with a mistress. We're talking about fancy resorts, high-end travel, luxury accommodations, all paid for with donations labeled ministry expenses. Now pause for a moment and really think about that. People who believed they were helping spread the gospel were unknowingly helping fund a lie. A very expensive lie. This isn't just about a pastor making a personal mistake. This is about abuse of trust on a massive scale. And what makes it even worse is how Marcus handled it when everything started coming to light. Did he own up to it? Did he step forward and say, "I messed up and I want to make it right"? No. He did the opposite. He spun the story to make himself the victim. He acted like the real crime wasn't the affair or the money being misused, but that someone dared to talk about it. That someone had supposedly tried to extort him. That's the angle he ran with, deflecting all attention away from the real issue and trying to protect his image instead. He stood on a stage, teary-eyed, not because of repentance, but because his secret had been exposed.
Why did you never come forward with this before this alleged extortion attempt?
Well, Joanie and I wanted to have plenty of time to heal. We wanted to have a track record of living right and doing right. Plus our children were young and we wanted to spare them the pain of this until they could at least be old enough to be able to handle it better.
How'd you find out?
There was an individual that cared about me and cared about him that had some information where they believed that this could be going on, and they came to me and shared the information with me, and I confronted him the same day.
And you knew this woman?
Yes.
Rachel did say that I did tell her I would ask you in this meeting. She said that when y'all went to the Easter service, I don't know where it happened, but she said that you said to Joanie offered you Marcus's necktie, and you said to Joanie, "I've taken everything else that man has. I don't want his tie." And y'all started laughing, but it's like a.
What did you say? I don't want the time. I don't want anything from you. I don't want your inheritance. It's kind of the heart of that.
No, I understand, but when you're saying I've taken everything else that man has.
He's just a joke. He's talking about me.
I figured you're talking about you.
You didn't have to have a tie. He was talking about me.
I didn't start talking to Doug until he was divorced. And we were just friends for a while, and then it turned into more. I went to people that I trusted and said, "Hey, I know I'm in a position where people are watching. I want to use wisdom, and I'd like for you to come and help, us walk through this relationship."
How to end an affair. And here's the dilemma that you're going to face. You want to be a good person to everybody. Everybody wants to be liked. And you've told both people that you want them, your spouse and this person. And this person's different than your spouse because all two people would be. You need to identify what you're getting out of it. You also have been building dreams with both people. You have the dreams of your spouse and how you're going to retire, kids going to college, what life's going to look like. And then you have the dreams of vacations and fun things and all kinds of creative sexual encounters. You have to understand why this affair is so important to you, or why you're even having an affair. Ending it's very hard. Lust is wanting something that God has not given to you.
Now that Marcus is no longer here, you'd think maybe the dust would settle. Maybe there'd be a moment of reflection. Maybe the ministry would shift toward honesty. But instead, something even stranger is happening. Joanie Lamb, his widow, has moved on. That's not a crime. People do move forward after loss. But what's raising eyebrows is how she's doing it and who she's doing it with. Enter Doug Weiss, her new partner. Doug didn't just quietly step into the picture. He didn't enter this relationship with grace and a sense of humility. No, Doug has made it very clear how he feels about Marcus Lamb. He's gone on camera making sarcastic comments, mocking Marcus's legacy, and even joking about taking everything he had. Let that sink in. The man who replaced Marcus is openly taunting his memory, and Joanie, who once defended Marcus so passionately, doesn't seem bothered at all. In fact, she seems comfortable letting Doug throw shade, almost as if it's all part of rewriting the narrative. It's eerie, it's cold, and it shows how quickly things can shift when power is involved. Yesterday's man of God is today's joke, and the people who once stood beside him are now aligning with someone who mocks everything he built. So again, this isn't just about one affair. It's not just about Marcus and some woman he shouldn't have been involved with. It's about a pattern of deception. It's about power, money, and image control. It's about how far people will go to protect a brand, even when that brand is supposedly representing Jesus Christ. When everything started falling apart, instead of turning toward truth and humility, they turned toward silence, spin, and denial. They protected the platform, not the people. They saved face, not souls. And the fallout is still happening. People are waking up to the fact that what they believed in might have been more of a show than a ministry. They're hurt, confused, and asking tough questions. Questions that deserve honest answers. How could so much money be spent on personal pleasure while real needs went ignored? How could a man preach loyalty while hiding an affair? How could a ministry that claimed to follow Jesus turn into a machine that prioritized image over integrity? And how can someone like Doug Weiss now stand in Marcus's place, mocking the past while claiming to lead people spiritually? These aren't small questions. They're the kinds of questions that challenge the very core of what we've been taught to believe. And they deserve more than smooth words or rehearsed statements. They deserve real, raw truth. So, let's stop pretending this was just a personal matter. Let's stop acting like this is just gossip. What happened at Daystar, what Marcus did, what Joanie enabled, what Doug is now feeding into, is a case study in how religious power can be used to manipulate, distract, and control. And the more we learn, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just about sin. It was about systematic deception. About keeping up appearances no matter the cost. And now, with Marcus gone, the cracks are wider than ever. This is a wake-up call. Not just for the church. Not just for Daystar viewers. But for anyone who blindly follows personalities instead of seeking the truth for themselves. Because at the end of the day, faith isn't about a fancy stage or a polished sermon. It's not about who wears the best suit or who gets the biggest donations. It's about truth. And truth doesn't need to hide behind millions of dollars, cover-ups, or sarcastic remarks from new boyfriends. Truth stands on its own. And no matter how much spin, silence, or sarcasm gets thrown around, truth always has a way of coming to light.